The original Crawfords came here. They left Scotland in 1852. John Crawford came with his wife Henrietta and children on the boat. And after several months travelling through various parts of Victoria, they came and settled in this valley. So the Crawfords have been here since 1852.
We've been involved with these sheep since 1870 when we took selection up in Victoria Valley. And I'm the fourth generation, now we're looking at the fifth generation, and we've had a very successful involvement in Saxxon sheep through all that time.
My name is Kelly Dowling and I'm a passionate, proud and positive wool grower. I'm 33 years old and I'm actually a sixth generation of wool grower here in Australia, in New South Wales.
My name's Peter Radford. I farm a block of 7,000 acres of land. We've got 10,000 pure Saxxon sheep.
I'm John Taylor, sixth generation here at Winton and the fifth John in succession.
And I'm Sarah, John's sister, and we're born and bred Tasmanians and work together here on the farm at Winton.
The history of the Saxxon line is a truly amazing tale. A tale that becomes even more amazing as we continue to research the fibre. During the Middle Ages, flocks of what would later be called Saxxon sheep accompanied the Arab expansion across North Africa and ultimately into Spain. Spanish royalty had never seen wool of this quality, and great efforts were made to refine the bloodline and retain its purity. By the 16th century, the kings of Spain held exclusive ownership of the best of the flock and cultivated the line further. This extraordinary breed became known as Escorial, after the name of the royal palace outside Madrid. By the 18th century, Escorial wool was a prized commodity, coveted throughout Europe in much the same way as gold. In 1765, the King of Spain presented a flock of his own select sheep to his German cousin, the Elector of Saxony. In this small corner of Germany, the sheep thrived. Within 4 decades, the fiber from what were now known as Saxon flocks superseded the finest that Spain could produce.
In the early 19th century, we're talking about 1810, 1820, Saxony had taken over the mantle from Spain as the premier wool-growing country in the world of the finest and the rarest and the most beautiful fibres. So, for very good reason, the name Saxxon became romantic, powerful, famous.
It is at this point that the Saxxon story intertwines with that of Brooks Brothers itself. Even before Henry Sands Brooks founded the company in 1818, his friends knew him for his fine clothing, which he brought back from his trips to England. On his buying trips, Mr. Brooks naturally sought the very best wool available. At that time, wools known as Saxonies were all the rage in London, and he quickly determined that his customers should have no less. He found what he was looking for in the mills located in England's West Country. The wool used in those mills to create the fabrics purchased by Mr. Brooks most likely came from, not surprisingly, Saxon sheep. History, however, would soon intervene to challenge the very existence of pure Saxon wool. Napoleon, having conquered Spain in the early 19th century, fed his starving soldiers on the remaining flocks at Escorial, thus wiping out Spain's precious holdings. After that, pure Saxon sheep in any reasonable quantity could be found only in Germany. It is during this period that an enterprising and courageous Scotswoman changed the dwindling fortunes of the Saxon breed.
And it was an extraordinary woman called Eliza Furlong who saw the potential of these rare genes.
Elizabeth Furlong, to improve the health of her asthmatic son, decided to relocate from Scotland to the drier climate of Australia.
And she was about to emigrate with her sons to Australia. So essentially she carried gold sovereigns under her corset and walked the lanes and the rough highways of Saxony, buying the best of the rare sheep from these breeders. Shipped them all the way to England, put them on a ship for another 3-month trip to Australia, ended up in Tasmania. And that was really the genesis of the Saxxons in Australia and the antecedents to this Brooks Brothers connection.
Every Saxon sheep that exists today is descended from Mrs. Furlong's original flocks.
Over a course of time, the Furlong family decided to move to Victoria, and they sold the land, the Kenilworth property, and a large portion of those original sheep that came out, and David Taylor then established our Winton stud in 1835.
The significance of Mrs. Furlong's courageous endeavor and the extraordinary foresight of the early Australian Saxon growers is evidenced by yet another twist of history. Germany, suffering massive inflation after World War I, was impoverished and starving. In response, the government dictated that the remaining sheep in the Saxon line be interbred with mutton sheep for use as food. Thus, the Saxon flocks of Australia, and by this time New Zealand, became and remain the sole source of pure Saxon wool. But what is it about the Saxon line that has made it so valued over so many centuries?
The thing that makes the Saxon sheep unique is the helical crimp that the follicles on the sheep produce. They're naturally a spiral shape, which gives them air and elasticity. When you pull it, it comes back to its natural shape, and that's the most unique thing about the Saxon sheep.
It's the handle of the wool that we don't want to lose. You feel other wools and you know it feels different, and it just doesn't have that same feel. And that's hard to describe. How do you describe a feeling?
You can have what feels like a loftier fabric for much lighter weight. It just has a lot of new uses that traditional woolen textiles don't have.
At the end of the day, you're going to look better in a Saxon suit or a Saxon jacket than anything else you can buy in the store.
Generally, sheep intended for the wool industry are crossbred for size, ease of maintenance, hardiness, and durability, all factors that promote large-scale and more cost-effective production. Saxon growers have chosen a more difficult path.
In recent years, the Saxon sheep as a breed has become very rare because very few people now are prepared to run this sort of sheep, because they've decided they want to go for a bigger sheep, and they've decided they want to go for a sheep that's going to cut a huge amount of wool, which means that there's only a handful of breeders that are left that have stuck with the true and pure breed.
Out of respect for the unique qualities of the Saxon sheep, generations of Saxon growers have dedicated themselves to maintaining the pure Saxon line. Thus, they are driven as much by love, tradition, and respect for quality as by profit.
Having a product and being able to share it with others and say, this is something that we've grown, this is something of ours.
Comments such as this explain why, of the more than 30,000 wool growers in Australia, only 30 to 35 families devote themselves to the Saxon line.
What we've got in this linkage between Saxon and Brooks, as I see it, is sort of a coming together of great artisans at each end of the spectrum to produce what can justifiably be said is from one of the rarest natural fibres in the world.
Traditionally, Saxon has been known as the world's golden fleece, and I think the Brooks Brothers partnership is absolutely critical to the preservation of this species for the world.
There's another characteristic of the Saxon grower that unites them with Brooks Brothers: a devotion to quality that reaches beyond the here and now, that understands that quality must be nurtured over generations.
And to me, they've always been a special breed of sheep. Because my father loved them so much, he always talked about them and how perfect they were in shape, and the wool was perfect for him. And I guess as generations have gone on, people have looked at them and say, why do you still grow these funny little sheep? And I guess in some ways you might have felt a little bit embarrassed when people asked about them and why do you still have them. But I guess we've always known there was something really special about them.
I remember when I left school, my father said to me, you have to leave the farm for 10 years to make sure that you're making the right choice in being on the land and growing wool. So I made it to 9 years and I did many things, but I finally got home, and it was probably the best decision I ever made.